Welcome, everybody, and this is another episode of Discovering the Empowered Self, a healing journey from early childhood trauma. And today we have with us Teri Williams. I'm so excited to have you with us, and you have some wonderful gifts and skills that you use to help your folks. Can you tell us a little bit more about what you do?
I am a shamanic energy practitioner and a multimedia coach. I tell people I live in two worlds. I walk in the mysticism and I walk in multimedia. And really my mission is bridging the two and helping people heal from the trauma that they've suffered their whole lives. There's 7 billion people on the planet, and I always say everybody needs a soul retrieval. So they need to find somebody to help them through that. Everybody's level of trauma is different. One person could react from the way somebody said hi to them, and the other could have been in an accident or an abusive childhood relationship. You know yourself the level and the degrees of what trauma can do. So my main mission is to really help people heal through that trauma and learn to walk in this reality with a little bit more ease, grace, joy, writing their new story. You and I talked about it a little bit in our conversation, but it really an opportunity to write a new story and give them tools so that when they walk out my door, they can have something to kind of fall back on when a trigger happens. I'm not a psychotherapist. I've been to many over the years. I'm 56 and I've probably done 20 some years of psychotherapy. It's really important to have those tools so that they can heal those wounds.
I agree with everything you said, like 1,000%. Yes, it's really important to talk about identity with trauma. Like our own identity has been written by the things that have happened to us.
Right.
But it's important, like you said, to rewrite that story because you are not what happened to you. You're not your pain, but you may feel that your view of the world becomes skewed. And it's so important for you to, like you were talking about soul retrieval. I know many people who are in the trauma response feel like now is not safe. And so they've projected their spirit elsewhere. Maybe they're always late all the time, or they're, can't ever be in the here and now and emotionally available or present for themselves. They self-abandon quite a bit. And that's the aspect of shamanic healing that like I intrinsically knew, but didn't know there was words for it, or that like, wow, people are doing this, like calling your spirit back, soul retrieving your soul from these moments that hurt you, because you're not just those moments, right?
Yeah, and what you just said there was you knew you did it, but you didn't have the words for it. And that's how I have walked my entire life. I didn't have the words for what I was seeing, feeling, or doing. I remember my mom would say, "You're just daydreaming." And I would be like, "It doesn't feel like a daydream to me," because she wasn't aware of it herself. She had her own story. You and I also talked a little bit about ancestral baggage. And she had her own story, only she didn't have the tools that you and I have to help heal that. So she didn't know what to tell me. She would just say, it's a daydream, or it's not real, or you're crazy, you're crazy. We're not crazy. We see this every day in our lives, how this work helps people heal. Even the shamanic journey, I teach people how to use the shamanic journey as a tool for healing for themselves. And I remember when I was young, I would run to the trees. When there was something intense going on in my home, I would run to nature and hide in the trees and what my family called daydream. But to me, it was a shamanic journey. I just didn't know that until about 15 or 20 years ago when somebody said, "Oh, that sounds like shamanic wisdom." And I'm like, yes. Oh my God, tell me more.
Yes. I mean, when you're talking about I walk in two worlds, I mean, that's the essence of shamanism, is the dream world and or a spiritual world. There's several parts of it. We don't want to get into the history of it.
Right.
But then there's like here and now in the 3D world, and then there's the spiritual world. And in my opinion, the healing work happens in that spirit dream world, the dreamland, because that's where we sent our souls. We stayed in those memories. We stayed in those moments in time. And that's what the soul retrieval is about, calling your spirit back to the whole empowered self. And that's why I call this discovering the empowered self, because we are already whole and well. We've just sent our spirit, pieces of ourselves, to these moments in time. And now it's time to come back to the here and the now, where we are whole, we are safe, we are loved, we are perfect in God's image. It's those ideas, to really feel them and know them to be true. And when you're talking about language, we were talking about this before our interview too, where in my police training, when they tell us, when we respond to family violence calls, and they would say that they've shown in research that the children who are the most affected by these incidents of violence and, trauma are the kids who are, you could say, anywhere from 3 to 6 years old and younger, like the infants in the room, versus the older children who can talk and verbalize their pain and their terror and their, shame and guilt. And like their trauma was encoded in a nonverbal way. And so in order to reach it and heal it, we have to go to that nonverbal space, that feeling space, that energetic space. And, we can call it the Akashic field, we can call it the dreamland, whatever you want to call it. That's why talk therapy doesn't work so much. And I think you and I were talking about how, we could go to years and years of therapy. And I do believe that they're important, right? They're important.
Absolutely.
But because this is a complex, we are whole, like multifaceted people, that our healing has to take place in a multifaceted way, because it went encoded in a complex way. It's going to have to be healed in a complex way.
Well, and the beautiful thing is that it's all complementary, right? It all complements each other. And there's not just one way, as you and I know. I mean, there's hundreds of different ways to find outlets for healing, whether it's energy work or shamanic work or therapy or sound therapy or nature therapy. Buddhist teachings of meditation are 100% different than a shamanic journey, and yet they can be very healing. In that space of solitude, they find their own connection, right? Their own connection in mindfulness and meditation. So they're all complementary. There's not one that anybody can say is better than the other. From my own experience, like you, I've been with my current husband for 16 years. I had 2 marriages prior to him. My children's father is an alcoholic and was addicted to cocaine. You can imagine the type of relationship that was. And my second husband, 2 weeks after we became married, became addicted to Oxycontin. And during that marriage, I went to therapy, but one of the most wonderful tools that I was shown was in a therapy session where this therapist started this group and followed the principles of imago therapy. And a big part of that was reconnecting with your inner child and creating that sense of safety for that child. I think I'm going to get a little emotional here. And that's how I feel about soul work, is that you and I, as soul retrievers and shamanic practitioners, we can go back to that time frame and capture the essence or the energy of the experience, whether we were shown the experience or just the elements of light or whatever, or whether we were told the experience as well, and offer that person and their soul a place of safety and unconditional love, something that we probably never experienced in our childhood. So And I would not have had that experience had I not gone to a therapist who incorporated those teachings into her own practice. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's all complementary.
Yeah, I love when we talked about this too. We were like, oh, we had such a great conversation off camera.
Let's record it.
Yeah, let's record this. And it's that idea. And I think I'd said, like, I personally feel that when we're doing this work, it's irresponsible to not teach people skills, how to feel safe, how to anchor themselves and ground themselves to reach a place of safety easily in their spirit, in their mind, whatever, so that when they go into the trauma, into the wound, they can pull themselves back to a place of safety. And without knowing that, like without doing that work, I don't think they would be ready to truly dive in and bolster themselves, if you will, to feel the pain, because we numb ourselves for a reason. It's really ultimately a self-healing, self-serving thing. It's not sabotage to numb yourself from pain. It's the way that your body learns how to survive. And what we're trying to convey here is, like, you don't have to stay in that survival mode. There's something more to life than that survival numbed mode. But in order to heal it, you have to feel it. Yeah. And to wake up to the pain after being numb for so long is a really overwhelming feeling. And that's why a lot of people take a while to really feel ready to deal with it. And some people go their whole lives and don't deal with it.
Right.
And I think that what we do here, with the shamanic work and the energy healing, is give people self-supporting tools, how to ground themselves, how to bring themselves to a place of safety, so that when they're in their trigger or their, moment of trauma, or they recognize it, of self-awareness, they can pull themselves back. Okay, I'm safe right now.
Right.
I'm here in the now.
Right.
And now because at one point now wasn't safe. The now wasn't safe at that time. It wasn't. So, retraining the brain and the soul to feel it's called anchoring, technically, and from a psychological standpoint. They even have I've seen where they teach, and you were talking about Buddhism or Hindi, the mudras.
Mudras, yeah.
They really help you. Like this one is an anchoring one. It closes your channels, like, so that, okay, if I'm feeling like I'm having an energy leak elsewhere, I can close my channels. Even if you use your tongue and you just stick it to the back of your teeth.
Right. One of the things that I teach to my clients, there's an acupressure point for focusing, and I'll tell them, when you start to feel that trigger, put your finger here. It's going to remind your body and your energy centers, your meridians, your channels in your body.
Your vagus nerve.
Your vagus nerve, yes. It's going to trigger all of that and help you come back to focusing on the here and now and know that you are safe. And we're going to have those triggers throughout our whole lives. A couple of years ago, my husband and I were having a conversation, and I don't know what exactly he said in that moment, but I was back to that little girl who was, being bullied and abused. And I got up, I lashed out at him, I walked in the other room, and this might be a little personal, but I'm going to share it anyway. I took a few minutes, I did the focus point, I grounded myself. One of my favorite tools for grounding is literally imagining that I'm a tree, that I have roots going into the earth, that my body is the body of the tree, that my top half is the leaves and the branches, and then I am easily and effortlessly flowing with the wind. And I got in the shower. And a few minutes later, my husband came in and he apologized to me. And I'm like, no, I'm the one who needs to apologize. I had a trigger, and those triggers are in our body, they're in our psyche, they're in our mind, they're in our soul. Those tools that you and I learn and teach are what help us come back to that moment, to be able to be in that tree and to recognize that that was a trigger. It wasn't about the conversation that he and I were having. It was a flashback in my body, my mind, and my soul. And having the ability to connect with that tree and this point, and to be able to say, okay, that's not a reality anymore. I'm in a new story, and life is pretty freaking amazing because I have these tools.
Yeah. So like everything you said was just so on point. I really am connecting with it myself. Like I totally, like one of the things I wanted to mention is, you're in a trauma response if you're having like these outbursts, these triggers. And we can kind of self-shame a little bit, like, why am I so messed up? Why am I doing this? Because our triggers and our trauma play out in our relationships, mostly our relationship with ourselves, because we have so much chaos going on the inside. There is that inability to connect with others in an effective or a meaningful way. And so why do we do this work? Because we want to be able to live outside of our trauma response. We want to know what it's like to live feeling safe, feeling fully in the moment, fully connected, emotionally available to somebody or ourselves first and foremost, because you can only love, people can only love you as much as you allow yourself to feel love, for yourself. And when you're talking about, all these self-soothing ways that you've taught yourself to support yourself, that's especially as a child. Most kids grow up like knowing how to throw a big old tantrum, but they don't know how to calm themselves down and to soothe themselves. And that's part of the issue is like, if I wake up this pain and I let myself get so upset, do I know how to stop myself and calm myself down?
Right,
and
which is why we don't.
Yeah,
we don't know.
It's not, we're afraid to open up this Pandora's box because we know it's like under a tight leash. It's under a very tight leash. But you may reach a point, like in my instance, my story, many people have heard it before, but I'll just repeat it for those who've not. My father left my family when I was 7 months old, and my mom got remarried when I was 7, and my adopted father adopted us, and so forth. But somewhere in between there was several years where I had no contact with my biological father. I still have not seen him. I'm 41 now, but his family found me maybe a year and a half ago. And I was saying to you, like, I think I would not have been able to handle the knowledge of some of my history around this man had I not done so much work and self-supporting work and learning these tools and skills to really dig into my history and my trauma and do the work. But when we're talking about triggers, you're needing to really address it when you're starting to not be able to control your triggers.
Right.
You can't stuff them anymore. They become like huge outbursts. I remember having ones where I would get into arguments with my partner and getting so frustrated, I'd start smashing my pillow on the bed. Like I was like, okay, it's time to address this, because that's when people who aren't aware start smashing people and smashing things.
Right.
In, me being a deputy, I've seen this firsthand. Like these folks who are having these violent episodes just don't know how to self-soothe, and they're moving energy, violence, anger, pain through hurting other people. So when we're wounded and we don't heal ourselves, we tend to wound others if we're not very self-aware. And so triggers are kind of, like you said at the very beginning of our interview, someone may have had somebody look at them and say hi, and it triggered something. I will tell you this, I work in the courthouse, and the very first episode or incident that I had where I was like, maybe it's time I need to deal with this. One of our judges was performing an adoption hearing, and I had all these memories flood back of being in the judge's chambers as a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, and my father giving up his rights, and I had forgot all about him. Mm-hmm. But it was such a profound, I was like, I think I have to sneeze, and I almost had to leave the room because I was so overwhelmed with feelings of frustration, sadness, like just mad at this man who could not be found to give up his rights, for me. And I was like, okay, I am an adult. I'm actually in the courtroom as an officer of the court. This is, bringing yourself back to here and now.
Right.
So I'm curious, tell me more about your history, like your trauma story and how you've healed it and what brought you to this moment.
As a child, I grew up the youngest of 6, and my brother was my bully, my abuser. I'm sure that he had his own story around being bullied and attacked. This went on for years. So, and you talked about, I don't remember if it was before our conversation or during this, but we talked about not feeling safe by your parent, or your parent not making you feel safe in that moment. And I don't think that my mom knew how to handle what was happening with my brother. I think that she thought it was more like sibling rivalry, but it really wasn't. He was a rageaholic, and he took it out on me. And from what my sister tells me, other siblings were the same. She's 10 years older than I am. And, so I went through a period of promiscuity and using alcohol to soothe my issues, and drugs and all of that. And got married. My first husband, he's an alcoholic, and he put my son, 2 years old, in a very unsafe position. My son ended up breaking his arm. Literally, the arm was a compound fracture. I tell people it looked like it was severed at the elbow, because that's basically what it looked like. And a long story short, they said he would never regain full mobility of his arm again. And the day that I brought him home from the hospital the first time, this man showed up at my house and just happened to show up, said he was looking at the motorcycle that I pushed out to the curb for sale. And he said, actually, that's not why I'm here. He said, I just returned from India studying with a guru in energy work, and something called me here. He said, I feel like there's a traumatic experience that's happened. So here I am, I break down and tell him about my son, and he ends up working on my son. And you fast forward 6 weeks later, they had taken the pins out, the cast was off, we're waiting for physical therapy. We're at the chief of staff of the local hospital, head of orthopedics, and my son is literally hanging on a bar with his arms fully extended. And the orthopedic surgeon dropped his jaw and said, this is a miracle. He doesn't even need physical therapy.
Wow.
And for me, that started my quest. My son is going to be 29, so this was 27 years ago. God, I can't believe it's been that long. But that started my quest on energy healing and metaphysics and healing the body in ways beyond just medicine. Again, going back to complementary, right? Mm-hmm. Western medicine, God, where would we be without it, right? And yet, adding that piece of metaphysics or energy work or shamanic work, whatever it is that you want to call it, but adding those additional complementary therapies were so beneficial for me in order to heal my own life. Once I started learning for them, it was more for me and recognizing my own trauma and triggers, and it's never ending. I learn something new every day. Every year I take a different workshop or class that helps me to heal myself first and then heal the world. Imagine if we could bring opportunity to all 7 billion people on the planet in some way, shape, or form. Wouldn't that be, that would be the ultimate miracle to me.
Oh yeah. It's funny you're saying, you have to heal yourself to heal the world. If all individual selves raise their consciousness, that's how the world raises its consciousness, the collective unconscious. Well, thank you for sharing all that about your kids. I wanted to mention, me and you talked a bit about generational trauma and
Yes.
how maybe our own trauma, if we don't heal it, can affect other people. Because especially for me, I have like a lot of mommy guilt. I think maybe with my two older boys, they have a very similar situation. The oldest one kind of bullied the second one, and I feel like I didn't protect him as much as I could have, or was capable or equipped to do so.
Right.
I was very emotionally unavailable throughout my divorce from their father. So now when you recognize when you're in your trauma response, to know how to bring yourself back to being aware and available, like that's how we heal ourselves. That's how we heal the world. That's how we raise ourselves up to be able to self-actualize and do the work that we feel like we're meant to do.
I'm sorry. I don't know if you can hear my dogs barking, but somebody's
Okay.
knocking at my door, so I'm trying to ignore it. No?
No worries. No
Sorry
worries.
about
Real
that.
life. Real life.
But I sense that. I mean, I can feel that as well because we are emotionally detached. How can we be there for our own children? My son was going through something 5 years ago, and emotional experience that his life was on a spiral downward. And I knew he needed soul work. I did not want to be the one to do the soul work for him. Why? Because I did not want to witness the suffering that I caused this child. Because we're human. You know, you talk about being emotionally unavailable for your children. We're human. So we were going through our own experiences as well. And I didn't want to witness it. I didn't want to witness the pain that I caused him. And I was in a journey, and I got a very strong message from my crew, you know, my posse and my helpers that he needed this soul retrieval. And I said, yeah, I'm like having this conversation with the spirit realm. I'm like, yeah, I know he needs a soul retrieval. And somebody said, you need to do it. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm afraid to witness that. And it was if I heard the voice of God. It was the loudest voice I can imagine hearing saying to me, who are you not to? You need to do this for your child. And I remember coming out of that experience, calling my son right away. You know, he was, 22, saying, you know, what are you doing? Are you sober? Can you come over to my house and we're going to do a soul retrieval? And he's like, now? I'm like, yeah, you need to come over here right now. But for so long, I didn't want to witness the pain that I caused. We're human, and we do that. And I'm really glad that I was able to do that for him and see that for myself, knowing that I had tools that would help me move through witnessing my own cause of suffering for him. Does that make sense?
Oh, perfect sense. That's what the generational trauma is about. It's like we pass on the wound until we heal our own wounds. And,
Right.
you know, it's funny how I think we talked about this too in our conversation before we started recording, where I feel like I was very lucky. My mother did protect me. She left my father at 7 months old. It turns out, you know, he was very much a sexual predator in certain ways. And she saved me. You know, I may complain about the wound of abandonment, but his absence was far less damaging than his presence would have been.
Right.
And so I sometimes have this survivor's guilt, like my mom did protect me and I was safe. Like my mom saved me from a lot of trauma. And at the same time, that can be part of other people's story, that their mother or their father, they didn't protect them.
Right.
And so this is what I mean by healing generational trauma. Like we become the legacy of our families. We become the ones who stop the abuse. And that was one of the things my mother would say was, I knew, my mom's very intuitive too and into shamanism, and she would say, I I knew I had to break the cycle.
Right.
Like, so I believe fully that we have contracts. We have soul contracts. We come to this earth for a very specific reason. We choose our parents because they're going to teach us certain lessons or allow karmic situations to play out. And so I do feel a very strong connection to certain people in this world that, like, I came here to do this for them, or they came here to do this for me. And in our, our children, there was a few moments where, like, I had my son's teachers telling me, God knew what he was doing when he made you his mother. Like, they're difficult at times and very, challenging. And at the same time, I understand where they're coming from, what the source of their behavior is. I know Oprah talked about the new trauma-informed care, which is like, instead of saying, why did you do that or whatever, it's what happened to you.
Right.
And, when in working in the judicial system, nearly every person who's committed a crime is a trauma sufferer. Almost all of the perpetrators of sexual crimes have been traumatized or victimized themselves. But the difference is not re-wounding somebody else in the process. So I really feel like this healing process is for us for several reasons. Again, multifaceted, it's complex. One, so that we can start living a fully self-actualized life outside of the trauma response, and two, not to re-wound, to break the cycle, to move forward and create a different story, right? And so the other piece I think we mentioned was identity. Like, when you've grown up in the trauma response, you may feel like, oh, I'm just screwed up. I'm always going to be like this, or I'm not a person who has good relationships, or I'm not a good wife, or I'm just not cut out to be a mother. Whatever story you give yourself, like, understand that it's a story. Right. And you can heal your trauma response and be the person you want to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And so one of my favorite, I don't know, my favorite taglines is what you focus on multiplies. And in order for us to change that story, we need to start using words like, I am a good mother, or, I am a great partner, or I am a great chef, whatever it is that you attach yourself to. And I think of it this way, growing up, we may have been told that we were not good at something so many times that actually became our story. And when you think about that, you think about, we were told that so many times. So if we use a new tool telling ourselves that we are actually good, or, good at something great, even a great lover, if we tell ourselves these things and give ourselves new words to use them, then our whole life is going to change. Just like our life changed by hearing that negative, abusive terminology and beginning to use that on ourselves, we have an opportunity to recreate that by bringing in new words and new tools to help us see that new story.
Yeah, I want to mention too something super important. For me, I could use all the words in the world and it would make a difference. I had to have that energetic shift in the body. Yes. Because trauma response is in the body.
Yes.
It
like stays in your fascia.
That state of stress in your body. Yeah.
Yes.
If you haven't healed that, you're not open to receive the new energy and the words of I am fill in the blank.
Absolutely.
You can say it till the cows come home and you're like, that feels like a lie,
Right. It's a whole combination, like we were talking about the complements of Western medicine and therapy and energy work. It's really a combination. And when I work one-on-one with clients and do soul retrieval and energy work, that's one of the first things that I tell them is that this is a combination of body work. I'm not a massage therapist, although I'm trained in acupressure. This is, we have triggers in our body that need to be released, just like we do our energy field and our light body. It's like a vacuum cleaner or dusting off your energy field, and it does stay trapped in our body. Statistics and studies are showing how it gets trapped in your fascia now, and that your fascia is
cellular memories too.
Yes, it's this whole light body and a net that surrounds your skin and every cell in your body. And in order for you to heal completely, you have to hit all three areas, physical, mental, spiritual, emotional.
And for me, I think, I'm sure this may be a common experience, where if you're in a trauma response in your body, there's a huge disconnect from being in your body, especially if there's any kind of sexual abuse or like physical trauma, like a car accident or something where the sensation of being in your body was just so unsafe that you live somewhere up here in your head, or over, your consciousness is over here, and you're almost like kind of looking down on yourself. And where I think the true healing takes place is being able to again, unnumb, melt the ice of the feelings, support yourself through feeling the unsafeness of your body, but releasing it, getting it out of your body. Because, and all this work happens in this dreamland, in this trance world, and in the Akashic field, in the energetic field, in my opinion. But bringing it from your physical body, it's all interconnected.
Right.
It's all interconnected.
Well, and so often when we were young, and even as adults, we hear it, right? That stop thinking about that, or get over it. Put on your big girl pants, pull up your britches, and just get over it. And that's really not the case. You have to face the experience at least as much of your ability to face it. There are some experiences that people may never remember. I think that being aware that something may have happened gives you an opportunity to heal it. You have to witness it. You have to see it to some degree in order to really let it go. Because if you don't, and you just say, I'm going to get over it, or, listen to what our parents told us about, just put it on a shelf somewhere and forget about it, that's when it festers in our body and in our energy field, and causes so much havoc. And then those triggers will keep coming back, and we won't have a way to move through them as easily and effortlessly. One thing that I really wanted to mention, we were talking about the shamanic journey and things happening in the energy field or in the Akashic field. And something that I tell my clients who are not really familiar with shamanic journeying and what that means is that it's like the opposite of meditation. And my husband is a Buddhist. So here we have, on one hand, we have the Buddhist who's quiet and no mind, no lotus, that kind of thing, and me, who's actively engaging in this process. So to me, the shamanic journey is really about allowing your imagination, your mind, whatever it is, the place to be on high, on go, that you're allowing your imagination to be present. And whether it's imagination, as some people think, or whether you are actually traveling, which you and I think we're traveling to an energy field or the Akashic field, but it's allowing your imagination to go as opposed to trying to turn your mind off. I know with me, I teach mindfulness meditation. I love the journey because it's very difficult for me to turn my mind off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that there's a time and a place for stillness, and then there's a time and a place, like for for me, the journey is a place to go in and work from my higher self. And if you invite another person's higher self in there, that's a great space for forgiveness. Like, you may not be able to talk to, like, my biological father. I don't contact him. I don't talk to him.
Right.
But, you know, in this 3D world here, but excuse me, in the shamanic world, in the sanctuary or whatever, you can invite their higher self in and talk to them there. And that's where some of that conversation can take place.
Yeah. And healing.
Yeah. And, you know, of course, do it with permission, you know, ask them if I can, you know, speak to you and talk to them there. But, you know, it's a safer space than maybe if the person is someone that you don't want to be around. It's not safe for you to be close to them. But I can't convey so much, like, this concept of safety and identity with safety. And some kids with early childhood trauma, they have felt unsafe so for their entire life that they don't trust feeling safe.
Yeah.
And that's,
and they don't know what it feels like.
Yeah. The feeling of feeling safe is almost kind of like nerve-wracking. It's like, when is the other shoe going to drop?
Right. So uncomfortable.
There's a trust thing. There's a trust thing going on. And not to shame the self for feeling like that. You're not broken. You created these responses to protect yourself. Because not trusting something that wasn't safe or trustworthy is the right thing to do, right? Mm-hmm. So there's nothing wrong with you. I think
and it's like putting up their own safety, you know, a safe shield, a force field of creating their own space where they're going to be comfortable. And yet
some people don't even know what their own space is, because that space has been violated for so long, or they've had porous boundaries. You know, mm-hmm. I don't know where I end and you begin, because of so many attachment issues. You know, mom and dad either left, or mom and dad were neglectful, or, you know, so many scenarios where that feeling of closeness, I give up who I am in order to chase an attachment to you. These are all like states of disconnect, states of, I need to call my spirit back to know who I am. Right. And it's all about the identity of self and healing, discovering who you are. I almost said uncovering the empowered self, because really in empowerment coaching, which is one thing that I've studied, we use the map of consciousness from David R. Hawkins, and there's certain levels of spectrums, and at the very lowest is shame, and they all have a different energy vibration, and it won't stand up to the test of science or whatever, but I love it as a construct to explain the spectrum of emotions and energy. Mm-hmm. And in there, you know, there's shame, there's guilt, and then there's apathy. And apathy is where a lot of people who are in trauma stay, because it's numbness. I'm not a victim.
Right.
I'm not going to be a victim. I'm mad at the world, but I won't let the world know, because right above that is anger. And, you know, once you start getting angry, you can start using it as jet fuel. But you don't stay in this state. That's the idea, is not to stay in this state. You know, a lot of people have been saying, well, I don't want to be whiny. I don't want to talk about it. I had all these experiences and I'm fine. I don't talk about it. Like, why are you, you know, going on and on and on? You're not a victim. Sometimes if you've been so numb and not allowed yourself to be a victim, you won't be able to move past, and you'll stay in that stuck area.
Right.
Something happened to me that shouldn't have happened. And then now I'm okay, and I can get angry about it. I can feel desire. That's another piece. Many, many people in the trauma response do not trust their own desires. Mm-hmm. Because the wound happened in a state of attachment or desiring the love of another, a parent, right? And it's devastating to want something and to feel the pain of disappointment. So many people don't self-actualize, and it can come out in ways that they wouldn't have expected, like never fully stepping into their gifts as a healer, or, I can't do that. It's not safe for me to really desire being a healer and becoming a shaman and having my own business. I have to stay in the safe job, and totally self-sabotage in the ways of goal setting. So that was one of the ways I realized, maybe there's something here for me. I need to do this work for me. Because when you think of trauma, you think of interfering in relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think in this new age of Aquarius that we will heal ourselves as we relate to others. Like in the Piscean age, we related going within, 40 days and 40 nights in the desert, and having our own little, when you go on a pilgrimage, often it's, by yourself, the El Camino, whatever. It's like walking the Appalachian Trail by yourself. And it's that, solo soul journey. But now I think it's so important to be able to relate to others. We heal through our relationships. That's the point of relationship, is to be able to really truly see. I had a spiritual intuitive tell me the point of marriage is to see the face of God. It's like, well, that's interesting. I saw the face of hell many times.
Me too.
But that's the point. Is like if relationship feels painful, if it feels uncomfortable, overwhelming, whatever, there's some trauma response there to heal. And so you want to be able to connect to others, because often you feel like it's the glass ceiling. Like I see other people having wonderful lives and relationships, and I'm just not one who, fill in the blank, can do that. That's that identity of the trauma response. So,
well, and have you ever noticed in your own practice that many of the clients that seek you out are either experiencing something that is going on within your life right now, or something that has gone in your life, and how it really brings an opportunity for you to heal even deeper within yourself.
Yes.
It's amazing to me how Spirit pulls that in for us, again, going back to healing ourselves, because if we can't heal ourselves, how can we possibly heal anybody else fully? It's like loving yourself. If you don't love who you are, not to say that we're not going to have days that we don't like an aspect of ourselves, but if at the core you can't really love who you are, how can you give unconditional love to somebody else?
Exactly. We're all interconnected. And that's why I say, like, in empowerment coaching, they talk about that spectrum of, the map of consciousness. It's all available to us, right? Every aspect of life, energy, whatever. But how quickly you allow yourself to come back to center, or make your bookends in a little more empowered way, instead of being way down here on the spectrum, stuck in shame and maybe getting to anger, and you live in that phase of the map of consciousness. Move up to, say, courage, and live in courage as your lowest point for the most part, and move into love. Those are your bookends, from courage to love, instead of shame and anger. And how quickly you come back to center is a skill set that you learned, like we were talking about, these ability to do shamanic journeying, to meditate, to do move energy in your body, like do sand paintings, do blow your energy. This is like the Quechua Indians, they blow a lot of energy into like rocks and like, energy, and maybe like a pile of leaves, and dissipate the energy. And this is ways of soothing the soul. This is the ways that, when I'm feeling like I wanted to go smash a pillow on the bed, maybe I should have blew energy into a rock and put it in the earth and let earth absorb it. And, and at first you're like, this is kind of strange, I don't know. But if you've never done it and you don't know how to regulate the self, these are great tools to help you transfer this energy out of the body and help you come back to center.
Yes, well, and to make it more moments, you and I have both both experienced those extremely high ends and those extremely low ends. And maybe we went through them for days or weeks or months. I had a period in my life where it was more like a year probably.
Mm-hmm.
And now there are moments, where I have opportunities, like I mentioned earlier, when I was triggered with that conversation with my husband. It was more of a moment for me, more a moment of a trigger or relating to an experience or, something on the unconscious level. And it became a moment of my moving through it because I had those tools. And I also remember, you said it felt uncomfortable to do it the first time when you were blowing. And when I was talking about the work I did with the therapist 20 some years ago, they had us stand in front of a mirror and say, I love you. Really look at yourself and say, I love you. Well, I always thought I had this high level of self-esteem, even with everything that I had been through in my life. I realize now that that was, a compensation from that childhood trauma. But when I had to stand in front of that mirror and say, I love you, I said, I felt like the silliest person in the world, telling myself that I love you. And now you fast forward so many years later, and I remember when my daughter was going through this really rough time, and I brought her into the bathroom, and I'm like, look at this person, tell her how much you love her. And she's like, Mom, that's really kind of stupid, right? Like you saying, it feels uncomfortable to blow into a rock or whatever it is. And yet, the more that you do it, the more comfortable that it feels. And even
and the more it's not important anymore what anyone thinks if it's helping you.
Right, it's helping you to feel more comfortable and to release whatever tension, blowing in whatever tension and releasing that energy, or looking in the mirror and saying I love you. There's nothing narcissistic about that. It's a great way to honor who you are. And yeah, it's okay. Those are good things to be okay with.
Yeah. I think compassion to self allows compassion for others.
Yeah.
And whenever we see some, I've always noticed if we see someone really being mean or like judgmental, I always think that's their inner voice coming out, their inner critic, the person, that's how they talk to themselves.
Right.
And I've had to be mindful of that myself. Like, wow, like that saying, I am not what you think I am, you are what you think I am. It's like, wow, something about you is triggering the heck out of me. Like, oh, wow. In this level of awareness, like, now what? I have all this awareness. What do I do with it? That's what these tools are helping us move that awareness, move that energy out, self-soothe. Once
Right.
I have my tantrum, now I know how to self-soothe. And that's the beauty of this energy work, the shamanic healing. And I'm so grateful that you and I got to talk, and that I'm really hoping that one of our listeners is hearing this and is saying, you put into words what I couldn't say, and has some big epiphany now, like, oh, okay, cool. Now I have permission to do this work, to love myself, to desire my desires, to heal myself, to let myself be something that I never thought I could be, which is whole and well. And, you're on mute.
There you go. The dog was barking, so I was trying to keep that out of there. But that they're worthy. Everybody is worthy. Everybody deserves to heal. Everybody deserves to feel safe and loved. Unconditional love. I love that you brought up the word compassion, and when people are going through something, witnessing that even when they're being mean, there's something within them. It's an opportunity for us to maybe send them love a little bit. We don't have to take it. I always tell people, you can love people, you don't have to take it, right? Mm-hmm. Learn to love yourself. But you have to offer them some space of comfort and healing and hope. Hope is such a great word.
Yes. Sometimes it's like the only thing you have. So
exactly. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, Teri, I'm so glad that we got to talk. Could you tell our listeners how they can reach you? And I think you have a free gift for them.
Yeah, they can reach me on my website, soulpractices.com. I also have a shamanic journey practice. It's a 30-day guided introduction with 34 videos. It's all online. That's on my website. And my free gift is the Blistery Journal. It was inspired by a gift my husband gave me 10 years ago, because this is my 10-year anniversary of my book. He had given me a cookie jar filled with little pieces of paper. It had 365 questions on it. And he said it was his recipe for learning to love me more. And I thought that was super cute. And so I answered the questions and I gave it back to him a year later. And my friends all wanted it. They were like, could you put this in a book? So I created the Blistery Journal, and it's 365 questions, really designed to help people tune into their own blissful history. You know, maybe help them recreate their own story. Things like, you know, was there an ice cream store that you went to when you were a child? Was there a favorite tree that you like to climb? What did you do to connect with nature? If you could pick somebody to be on a board of directors, you know, somebody that empowered you, that really resonated with you, who would that be? So there's all kinds of questions, allowing you to see some of the joyful things that were in your life as opposed to the negative. It's pretty cool. So it's a free gift. They can go to my website. You'll have the link on the page here, and download it and dig in. Find some joy in their own lives.
Oh, that's so beautiful. It's so awesome to have, once you've emptied out from what you don't want, to fill it up with what you do want.
Yeah.
That's so important. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you to all the listeners for being with us and sharing this time with us. Thank you. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you. And I'll see you on my show next.
Yes.
Thanks.
Bye.